typical HVAC company does about 85% of their revenue during the summer, and that's not a good thing. That's a very dangerous thing.
Welcome to The Boost, a podcast for home service contractors. We explore leaders and innovators in home services, their personal journeys, thoughts, and experiences with growth, marketing, and succession. We cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and its ultimate impact.
Welcome everybody to this webinar about avoiding the post-summer cliff. I've got Zach Wilson here with Local. I'll let Zach introduce himself in a minute, but to set this up, why are we doing a webinar in the middle of June, right? Like some people might be asking. And in a seasonal business like HVAC, what you do in June and July and even into August directly affects what you feel in your off season. So that's why it's important to be talking about this now in the middle of June, because this is actually when you have the most control over your off season. Once you get to your off season, your best hope is to do the best you can and wait for the next demand season and try to take advantage of it. So there's a number of things we can talk about with marketing and operations and pipeline management. And so Zach's here with Local. Zach, would you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks for having me, Derek. Yeah, I'm Zach Wilson with Local. We're a digital marketing company for HVAC, plumbers, electricians. And our position in the market is pretty much to help everyone get leads. But one thing that we really excel at in terms of the channels, which are paid and SEO, is to make sure that you are getting lead flow and that lead flow matches to dollars. So making sure that each channel that you're managing or we're managing is generating a positive return on spend for you, so that you're not spending money and actually losing money, which happens a lot more than you think. So we help you see your ad spend, we help you see what's actually coming in through your channels, and we help you with your operations to fix those things when we see them, so that you can get to a place where you're revenue positive for your marketing.
Yeah, that's great. No, definitely. When we were talking a few days ago, Zach, I said the top two pains that I hear from almost every single contractor, no matter where they are in the US and even in Canada, are hiring and marketing.
Yeah.
Top two pain points, whether they're a small company, a mid-sized company, a large company. And I'm Derek. I'm one of the coaches and trainers here at SBE. We're a coaching and training company for residential home services. And specifically, we're going to be talking about HVAC in this particular webinar because it is summer, which means something to HVAC companies. And so just to kind of get this started, Zach, from a marketing standpoint. So in most places that it's going to get hot, it's now hot. So, phones are ringing because it's hot. But from a marketing standpoint, kind of the companies that have this figured out best and kind of, predictably have a good summer, what do you see them doing right now from a marketing perspective?
Well, we talked about this in our prep a little bit, and the takeaway is there's two operators, right? Those that are playing catch up for the summer and those that are ahead. And those that are playing catch up, are imbalanced in terms of their supply and demand, right? And those companies, I mean, we have a lot of them that can't, you might not even be able to market during the summer because you have so much demand and you don't have enough supply to fill that demand. And that's, to your earlier point, what is the problem? Hiring, right? And
Yes,
getting ahead of
they go
that.
together.
They really do, especially during the summer. And then you have, other type of companies that can do their marketing and they're trying to make sure that they can keep up the demand and the supply, and they're sort of playing a little bit of catch up. But in both cases, I would say we both agreed on and see is that the ones that can take advantage of the summer and build on their existing customer database are the ones that are growing year over year. I hate to oversimplify this, but there's really two objectives in the summer. And one is new customer acquisition, so you can start marketing to them. And then number two is selling in mass memberships, right? And those are overarching the two goals. And then the third one, which I think I'll 100% give you credit for. The really, really savvy people are starting somewhere now, maybe July, depending on where you are in the country, to plan for fall. And how are they doing that? They're getting ahead by starting to focus this summer on their aging systems, trying to get them ready for when their system might fail, whether that might be in fall or people might be taking advantage of deals in the fall or something like that. And then those other ones that are just prepping, I mean, the people that are really ahead, I'm guessing that have really, really big club memberships, and I'm talking like 30, 40,000, might honestly already be starting to book their fall tune-ups and starting just to get ahead of that and say, if I'm in Missouri or whatever, and I know that with pretty high certainty that middle of September we start to slow down, start getting people scheduled for that. Just to pause there, I mean, that's a good starting point in terms of where we want to go.
Just a little housekeeping for those watching this live as we're doing this. There is a chat function on there. If you find the chat button and you want to open that up, you can submit questions or comments that you want Zach and I to see. I'll keep my eye on that. And if any questions or comments pops into there, we'll make sure that we address that specifically. So we want to make sure you know that you have that ability to ask us questions directly while we're talking. Okay, so going back to that, Zach, as a coach and a trainer that's kind of in the trenches with these companies on an operational side, what's happening in the field. I do a lot of technician training, a lot of sales training for the comfort consultants. There's two types of HVAC businesses and two types of customers, reactive and proactive. If we think about the common issues that plague the industry, Zach, which is why you and I consistently and reliably are employed, because of common issues that plague the typical HVAC businesses, it's very reactive. And that's kind of trained a lot of reactive customers, right? It's very reactive. Oh, wow, it's hot. The phones are ringing. I don't have enough text. There's not enough time in the day, right? Even though, like you were saying, it reliably and consistently gets hot around the same time of the year with a little variant. On the back half of the summer, it fairly consistently drops off, and then it's like panic, panic. The phones have stopped ringing. What are we going to do? And that's trained a lot of reactive customers because we've said things to our customers, hey, call us when you need us. And so we've got reactive companies training people to be reactive customers, and that is a terrible business model.
And I think a good call out there and transition is to talk about operators that understand their businesses, right? So we talked about goal and metric, which is for every service tech, you should have around 500 memberships, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that you introduced me to, and I will 100% lean into that because we do a lot of this analysis on our side to help owners understand lead flow, demand, and supply. And as an owner, you need to understand these things. And so if you're going through the summer, you need to set goals. And you don't have to be exactly at 500, but if you only have 50 memberships, just very low number, and you're going into your fall, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to have to do a lot of responding, reacting, outbounding, right? And react to that environment and that deficiency. If you have, I don't know, pick a number, 4 techs, right? Service
Yeah.
tech, you do not have enough in your pipeline to fill them, right? And similarly, during those service months now, right? Like we have high demand because people are turning on their systems for the first time, they're running them, 20 hours a day, etc. Understand if you have whatever the rough math is, like 3 service techs, right? For each service tech that you have, you need to get them to fill their schedule, you need about 200 to 250 jobs a month, service call jobs a month to keep them busy 5 days a week, right? So
Yeah.
everyone's math just to back into that per service tech, 3 jobs a day times 20 days in a month on average, Monday through Friday, and then 4 days is 240 exactly. So from a marketing perspective, whether it's memberships 500 or jobs, right, during peak months or non-peak months, you need to understand that because you need to know your goal. How am I going to get 240 customers to service per technician? And as you go up, that sounds like a very, very big number, but that's how you have to fill your boards. And then similarly, another thing we talked about is like, how do you accomplish this goal of getting memberships in mass, right? Like one thing that we talked about on the marketing side, and you're not a fan of, and I'm not a fan of, is giving away memberships during the summer. You have a high intent, high demand opportunity. If you feel like your membership or maintenance plan or club membership, whatever you all call it, is undervalued and people aren't biting on it, don't give it away. Maybe do a carrot and do like 1.5 years or something. Give away 6 months or incent it in a different way rather than just giving that away free. Everyone says they roll it into their installation, which I know most people don't do.
If we're giving it away, what is the likelihood that someone with a brand new system has you come out and run a visit on something they didn't even pay for? Adding those calls to the board is so low. Well, if someone paid for it, we would need the ability to move a customer from a reactive customer to a proactive because now they're being proactive about this new system that they have, right? We're selling maintenance at the point of sale. Something that I tell business owners all the time, HVAC business owners, is anything you're feeling today is based on a decision and an action that you did 6 months ago, right? So if you're here on June 18th and you're operating at capacity, you are staffed up, you have a good close rate, you have a good average ticket. It's because 6 months ago you were training your techs, you were fixing inventory, you were setting up some of the marketing and doing things, and it was 6 months ago that you prepared yourself for today. And then the opposite thing too, whatever I do today is going to affect how future me feels 6 months in the future. So if I sell no maintenance agreements today, in 6 months from today, I have no calls to go run when we're not in demand season. When we're reactive, we're not thinking about the future version of ourselves in the 6 months from now version. We're just dealing with today. And today on June 18th, it might be a hot day, and we're just trying to get bodies out to houses. And that's really the whole entire focus. And we're not looking at the average ticket. We're not looking at the close rate. We're not looking at how much time the technician is spending with the customer. We're not looking at all these other things because it just literally gets down to like bodies to houses. And it feels good because the phones are ringing and it's hot. But the typical HVAC company does about 85% of their revenue during the summer. And that's not a good thing. That's a very dangerous thing.
The old 80/20 rule, right?
It's a very scary thing. We saw this a couple of summers ago where the Mid-Atlantic and a few other places in the US didn't have a summer.
We're suffering from that this summer. We've had like 2 days over 80 in the Midwest.
Companies, when that happened, went out of business
Yeah.
because they don't have a profitable off season and they're completely reliant on making enough money during the summer and stretching that money out to the fumes until the next summer hits. And so if something throws a wrench into that's a problem. And yeah, so we're talking about maintenance agreements. That is the number one way to not have an off season is selling so many maintenances during the summer.
I think one of the other deficiencies in terms of these elite, mid-level, and bottom of the barrel companies and operators are part of the goal setting and incenting. And this is just something that, whatever region of the country you're in, whether you're Arizona, Texas, New Orleans, Louisiana, Florida, the really hot belt where you're getting the heat market.
Yeah.
Right. You're getting 4 to 5 months of summer. You've got a really long summer. And for each person that you put out, how are you going to get that tech to try and get to their goal of whether it's 100 maintenance agreements or 500 to help bridge that gap? And part of it is just good management, right? Setting goals. It's checking in weekly, saying, okay, are you tracking? Are you not tracking? Why aren't you tracking?
Yeah.
And you said, I mean, you work with a ton of technicians where I do not. I work with more the owners. Techs hate selling memberships.
Yeah. They don't want to sell or be viewed as a salesperson.
Right. So like, I mean, even as we just got in the comments, offering a spiff or an incentive to sell them, like, is that enough? Right. And you just have to ask your question. If I have a goal of, a tech is actually meeting their goal of 240 service calls in a month, right? What percentage do you try and coach or tell people they should hit in terms of membership sales. What's a real market number for that?
Yeah, such a great question. And to preface that question, something you said, most companies have no idea what their close rate is on maintenance agreements. Don't
Yeah.
know how to track, never thought to track it. If we don't track something, it's really hard to improve it. So to answer your question, during the summer, the close rate should be 50 to 60%. I would love to see one out of every two service calls. We walk away with a maintenance agreement. I know some techs that during the summer are doing 70 to 80% close rate. This is not because we're discounting it, not because we're giving it away. I don't think we need to discount memberships in order to sell them. I think if we feel like we need to do that, it's a training issue. I work with a lot of technicians. I probably talk to 1,000 techs a year. When technicians are not selling maintenance, to me, it always comes down to one of three things, or oftentimes all three things. The first one that we have to figure out is, does the technician actually believe in maintenance? When I start working with a lot of technicians, sometimes they're just neutral on it, or they even think it's a waste of a customer's money. Again, they're thinking reactively, they're not thinking through the homeowner's mind of being proactive and avoiding expensive repairs.
So for me, it's funny because I think they absolutely do have value. And my perceived value, my opinion on this is that a lot of people gloss over this. And I'll just sidebar this. There is this whole camp of people that sell clubs and not memberships. So the clubs, they're not on the hook to give the people anything. You don't have this contract to actually go out and service them twice a year, which has its merits. But from the value perspective, my favorite service providers for me as a homeowner are people that are proactive and say, whether it's technology or not, let's say, hey, SMS marketing, rehashing, email, whatever it is, that just say mine is pretty low fidelity. They actually call us, which I don't necessarily love because I answer the phone, but they say, hey, it's time for your spring tune-up or it's time for your thing. Like, you're part of our membership. We're doing this proactively. Like, great. I would have never remembered to do that.
Yeah,
Proactively, just tell me that you're going to come out and do it. My water filtration people do the same thing once a year. They just say, we're going to be back, whatever. We put it in the calendar and they show up. That is service. Like, I don't even care
mhm.
about any of the stuff that they do. It doesn't even
Yeah.
matter to me. They just
Well,
show up and they say they're going to do their job.
100%, right? So if we have techs that don't believe in what you're saying, a lot of times too, it's they're just mirroring the actions that they see from the leadership as well. The leadership isn't doing those things. They aren't reaching out and all that. So the technician's like, well, if it's not important to my company, why should it be important? That's the first reason why techs don't sell, is belief issues and seeing the value in it. The second is the compensation plan. A lot of companies, might be spiffing $5 or $10. It's not going to move the needle enough. So it needs to have an aggressive, and again, we have to, in some ways, put our money where our mouth is, right? If this is like one of the most important things, we should treat it as such with how we compensate and commission it. So it should be very aggressive. And then the third reason why techs don't sell is they don't know how. The company, the owner, or the service manager is saying, hey, you need to go sell maintenances, and they're missing the training and the practice and the coaching of the skill of how do you actually do it. And so a lot of times, I think when technicians try to sell maintenances, it does come across like a door-to-door salesperson, where it's typically like at the end of the visit, it's summer, so they're out there for a demand issue. And kind of like as they're putting their tools away and cleaning up, they're like, oh, hey, homeowner, by the way, before I go, could I interest you in our maintenance agreement program? It's got these features and benefits. The likelihood of closing that is 1 out of 100. 1 out of 100 is going to be like, oh, I already believe in this. I've always had a maintenance. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I'd like to do that.
Right.
You're not going to have that 40, 50, 60% close rate with that type of approach. So technicians need to be trained and given a process and practiced, and everyone hates role play and practice, but you've got to do it. You've got to be very comfortable with having this conversation with homeowners. So the homeowner doesn't view it as an upsell, or you're trying to squeeze a couple $200 to $300 more out of them on top of this repair that they're doing, that the homeowner actually views the maintenance agreement as a solution to a problem that they have. And so the way that you do that is you talk about it and ask questions about it, throughout your whole visit. So it's those three things. So for anyone listening to this, if your close rate is not 50% this summer, it's going to come down to one of those three things, and usually a combo of those three things.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, what do you think? I know this varies from region to region, but what do you like to see in terms of pricing, whether you like annual or monthly? Because my general feeling is, and most of our clients actually are underpriced in terms of the membership and
Yeah.
are kind of giving away the farm because they're afraid of people saying no, right?
Yes. Or
Like,
they're just used to people saying no. So with the
right.
lack of sales training, they're trying to overcome the no with pricing.
As a coach and trainer, I know you're not specialized in pricing, but what do you perceive as like
Yeah,
a
well,
good
pricing
value?
is actually, I've built so many price books for company that is like actually one of my
Oh,
areas
okay.
of
Sorry.
expertise. Yeah, it's pricing. But I'm going to reframe this a different way because I want to change people's perspectives about the maintenance program. So I'm going to reframe it by asking you a question, Zach. So what are you seeing right now? And again, all the context that you gave of it varies by region and things like that. But for a company to acquire a new customer through marketing, how much would they be expected to pay? And we're talking about a good customer, someone with like a 10 plus year old system.
We don't track that granularity, which we probably should, but we don't because we don't have access to all that. But
Yeah.
but generally from market to market, it can vary anywhere from 180 to 260, 270. We call it a cost per qualified lead,
Yeah.
not a CAC, customer acquisition cost. That's different. But from a marketing qualified lead that is bookable, and just to be clear, we differentiate those. It's not, most agencies say everything that comes in is a qualified lead from our marketing. We don't do that. So we separate out anything that's unqualified. If someone's a job seeker, wrong company, wrong service, the common one is duct cleaning, right? Like that
Mhm.
happens all the time. Auto repair, etc. So it's a very real number. And if you aren't filtering out those people that are not qualified, right? So just take, for example, you get 50 quote unquote calls and 10 of those are not qualified, right? If you're taking 50 over your $5,000 marketing spend or whatever, you're getting a cost per qualified lead of $100 per cost per qualified lead. But if the denominator changes, right, you actually take your only qualified customers, and let's say 35 of those were actually first time callers, qualified customer. Now your customer cost per qualified lead is actually $142. Very
Right.
big
True.
difference.
Very
So
different.
you need to understand that, as I said, in part of the marketing slash education that we do, we point out that says, hey guys, this phone call is costing you, $245. Answer the bloody phone, right? If you miss that phone call, you are lighting $245 on fire. And that's a zero opportunity. And as soon as you know that, you're like, holy shike, Susie, whatever, answer the damn phone. You need to know that and you need to understand that. So anyway, I kind of went in a tangent, but now that you know like 160 to 270, 280 are sort of those parameters for cost per qualified leads,
Okay.
where are you taking this?
I don't know if you can tell why I would ask that. What should someone charge? Because the point of marketing is for the phone to ring and to get
Right.
calls, right? What is the point of selling maintenances is one, to take care of your customers and get their systems going, of course, but it's also to have calls to go run, right? I do actually do a lot of pricing work for people. And to me, pricing is math and it's science. I don't think that pricing is an art. Pricing is not based on where you live, it's based on the internal math of your company, what you're paying your
Right.
tax and what your labor is.
Well, which could
So
be where you live, but yes.
that would be a whole tangent, but it's funny because even
Yes.
people like in the back country a lot of times aren't paying their tax a whole lot different than somebody in a big urban center,
True.
and yet
Yeah.
they say that their pricing should be different. It's a whole tangent, right? So it's based on our internal math. So like what is the overhead of a maintenance agreement? Like the COGS, right? The cost of
Right.
goods sold, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
right. So then most most pricing gets set then around what we're paying the techs because they're the ones, operating, and it's their time that we're trying to cover when they go out to the house and all that type of stuff. But to answer this, I need to know what it is that I want to compensate the technician on this. And so there's going to be a little bit of like their hourly time plus the spiff that I am going to pay them when they sell it. And then there's a wage to revenue where it's 20% wage to revenue of the technicians. We don't ever want it to exceed that. So then I know what I should charge for my maintenances, right? So if the total compensation for the technician is going to be $50 from what they got spiffed, and everything, then I take 50 and I divide it by 0.2, right? And that's going to give me where I should be charging for this annual maintenance. And I don't know if you have a
So
calculator.
they're based on the comment we have that's $99, they're way under because that calculation shows them at 50.
250, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if the compensation is going to be 60 out of this, because again, the spiff and then everything, 60 divided by zero point 0.2, 300. And that's typically where I'm seeing most companies that are priced correctly
Wait, do that math again. I missed that. What was the 300? 300 was what?
would be if the compensation to the technician is $60.
Oh, gotcha. I
Yeah,
missed that.
60
Okay,
divided
gotcha.
by zero point 0.2.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, so for companies that are priced correctly right now, that's what I'm seeing is 250 to 300 for annual maintenance. That was a very long way to answer your question, but I also wanted to pre-frame it that we need to think about this as also this is how we get calls.
So, sorry to interrupt. I just backed into this math. So in this math, that's $99 from Luciano, is their appropriate spiff for this pricing should be $20
Yeah.
based on a
Yep.
$99 membership.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
We track a lot of data, and what we've just sort of seen from a compensation structure is that it doesn't really move the needle with the technician until that spiff gets above 30. So I do prefer to see it in the 40 to 50 range. And so that
That's
would maybe just
interesting.
be a 250 to $300 price tag on it.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know where they're at in terms of the spiff, but yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm meeting with a company for the first time, they're not a part of our program. I haven't dove into their pricing and their math, and I'm just trying to find out where they're currently at. It's not uncommon for them to tell me they spiff like $10 on a
Yeah,
maintenance. And I'll
which
be like,
is,
okay,
yeah,
I've solved 1/3 of the problem.
right.
We need to bump this up to like 40 to 50.
Well, in that vein, it's total tangent from, marketing and during the summer, but just in that vein, we've sort of pivoted away from recommending bounties for just normal reviews and basically changing that bounties for picture reviews since those are so hard to get. And then just balloon that to $50, $75, whatever you think will, your tech will be incented to do. And then, you sort of back into it's the same thing because you're like, oh, like, yeah, $5 a review or whatever. It's just not very compelling,
Yeah.
right? I got to get, 50 reviews before I make any money, right?
Yeah. This was a couple of years ago, but there was a tech I was working with and stuff, and the company spiffed $10 whenever they sold a maintenance. And so this tech would, anytime he did sell one, he would pay the office person $10 to fill it out and do it for him. Just to basically like call the customer back and take care of it. And
Awesome.
it wasn't, the $10 just wasn't even worth it to him of like doing the paperwork and filling everything out. So he would farm it off. And then, of course, like then if we think, okay, how often then is this technician bringing it up and put it into the recommendations? It's not going to be very often.
Right. Yeah.
It's like almost like, oh, dang it, I sold one. Okay, well, let me call the office and I'll give them the $10 just so they can handle it and deal with it.
Right. One more thing that I want to call out that I thought was interesting in our pre-call was this idea, yeah, and again, like, depending on where you are in your growth and sophistication, this idea of your A, B, and C techs and
Yeah,
how that plays into your scheduling and your dispatching, if you will, for profit. So I'll let you take that because that's your thing or one of
yeah,
your things. So I think that's worth sort of coloring now to help just understand if you even do have different levels of text, what that means
yeah,
and how you can benefit from that.
yeah. If we have three techs, then we've got three levels of techs. And then as our group gets bigger on that, this is how we should kind of look at it. And this directly applies to marketing and our marketing strategy as well. But the idea is like, from a dispatching standpoint, This is again a huge summer mistake and an off-season mistake as well, but no single decision affects profit and revenue more than dispatching of who we send, right? The purpose of dispatching is to put the right tech to the right customer. So to kind of simplify it, this idea of like our A techs, these are the techs that can sell anything, talk about anything, typically have the best customer service experience and the best like communication skills. And so, if we have selling techs, this would typically be our tech. They are really good with customers. We know that they're A techs because we should look at their data, not because of our gut feeling, but they have the highest close rates, the highest average tickets. And so we want to specifically dispatch those to people with systems older than 10 plus years old. Makes sense. The B techs oftentimes might actually be the best mechanics. They might be better mechanics than the A techs, but they're not as good with the sales side. So these tend to be the technicians, maybe even with the most experience, like they've been a tech for 15, 20 years. They're just not maybe super interested in selling systems or they can repair anything, right? So we want to
Hmm.
use our B techs first for like system 6 to 9 years, because that's typically where just repairs and things are going to be on the table. And then when capacity requires it, then they would go out to systems 10 years or older. And then our C techs are our newer techs. These are the ones that are green, they're a bit inexperienced. And so we want to get them experience. And so ideally, these are the techs we want to send to systems younger than 5 years. And so we always want to keep them busy. So even during the summer, how we market, we still want to be attracting maybe during the summer a 4 or 5 year old system that doesn't have a breakdown. It's just looking for a tune up. It just
Right.
happens to fall during the summer. And so we do want to be marketing those, whether it's through our website, through some PPC, through outbounding, which is one of my favorites, where we're calling a past customer. So we're booking our C techs, our B techs, and our A techs. Sometimes it gets so hot and so crazy that it's all hands on deck, but we still want to be somewhat strategic. As we start getting into the back half of the summer, we need to be thinking, hey, every year, September 15th, demand calls really drop off. Or I lived in Phoenix for like 15 years. It didn't happen until like Halloween, but wherever it is, we want to be thinking ahead of, okay, let's start booking our maintenances and our tune-ups and completely fill up our C-Techs, starting October 1st. We get them booked up. Now let's start booking up our B-Techs, but let's leave our A-Techs free because summer might extend a little further and we might be getting demand calls as it comes in. But what we don't want is the opportunity cost. Zach, if you have 5 techs, you already did the math on, the running 4 calls a day, 5 calls a day, times 5 days a week. What if you miss time when summer ends and now you have 2 weeks where basically you had no calls because the machine needs some time to get started of going out and running tune-ups and maintenances. You mistimed it. And so you basically have 2 weeks of a gap. If you times it by all those texts, the opportunity cost on that, the missed opportunity of revenue is massive versus you timed it right. You were already booked out. Demand drops and there's no dip. You've already booked your C and your B techs. You can get those A techs filled in and call capacity does not drop or anything. That's a massive amount of opportunity. If we have 2 demand seasons, and so we do that twice a year, our winter demand and our summer demand. So we have a month of the year, the 2 weeks plus the 2 weeks of no revenue because we weren't prepared. That is so much missed revenue.
And I think that one of the most undervalued, I mean, depends on what level you're talking about, but I would go so far to say all levels, and you said it too, you liked it, is the database segmentation and the outbounding,
Mhm.
just doing some really base. And it kills me that like how easy this is, but there's just people, I think, just get caught up in the day to day and forget to
Reaction.
do this. It's just that reaction and just downloading your database, segmenting your database, and looking at where are people in life of their system, right? And just doing some outbounding in terms of targeting some of those people. I mean, everybody and their mother, if you will, has some idle time with their CSRs. Some of the more sophisticated companies, I hear that they have certain CSRs that are supposed to hit outbound targets weekly. They'll have their lists and they just have to do their targeting weekly. Think of this as the owner and think about it. You're paying your CSR to be in the office, to answer phones 40 whatever hours a week. Very few companies are answering the phone 40 hours a week. What tasks that add to your bottom line can you add to do this? It's very simple. And even if you aren't that good at your data collection, you've got to have some data on who has 5-year-old systems, 10-year-old systems, 10-plus-year-old systems. Like you've got to have at least a small subset of your database to do that. And you can do the same thing with mailers, right? These don't have to be expensive, complicated marketing tasks, right? It kills me because it's so simple. I wish I could step into some of these businesses' shoes and just say, let's do this. All it takes is let's go into your House Call Pro, your Service Titan, your Workies, whatever, download your database, run a report on aging systems, and hand it to your CSR and say, okay, here's your list of 500 people. I want you to get through this in the next 6 weeks. It's 50 calls a week, not hard. It's like 10
Yeah,
calls a day.
it's not hard, but a lot of people just hate it,
It's,
right? With a
yeah,
passion. They would rather do anything. This is tough for the small company. In the smaller company, everyone's wearing multiple hats. The CSR likely isn't calls 40 hours a week, and the company knows that. So they've also put on this person invoices, payroll, inventory, outstanding balances. And so they've filled up this person with all these tasks that distract from the purpose of that role. The purpose of the CSL is to book appointments,
right,
not to answer the phone. That's a misconception that their
right.
purpose is to answer the phone. It's not because the phone
Yeah,
doesn't ring all the time. If they're not on an inbound call, they should ideally be on an outbound call. If the capacity of the inbound really is, exceeding, then we should hire another one. Some companies have 20 CSRs or 25 CSRs.
yeah,
And it's kind of like selling maintenance agreements where you can't just tell somebody to go sell a maintenance and expect success. You can't just tell someone to pick up the phone and dial and expect success. You have to train them. You have to coach them. You got to practice it. And there has to be a legitimate reason why you're calling people. So there needs to be a good, timely, and rotating offer. And there needs to be a good script that you're testing. And you do need to track it because if you're not getting a certain close rate, you need to fix your list, fix your script, fix your offer on these things. And I know for a lot of companies, this sounds very sophisticated, but it's really not. It's just a training thing, implementing it and then being willing to listen to calls and help coach,
right. I mean, it's being a
being a
manager,
leader.
which,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, just people just don't, it's hard to do and people don't like doing it. It's just that simple. And if you can't, maybe it's like, you have to think of it as like training, coaching, whatever verb you want to use to do it. You can't just expect someone to come in and know everything and do everything.
No, it takes so much discipline and so much focus and so much strategy to, let's say on August 1st and it's 100 degrees out to be thinking about October.
Right.
And that's why it oftentimes doesn't happen. And then what happens in October, you get a call from someone panicked. Hey, the phone's not ringing. People aren't clicking on our website. Well, yeah, because no one has an issue with their system in October, right? So it's not like they're out there Googling for HVAC repair in October. They're not running their system. And so it takes a lot of focus on October 1st to be like, hey, I know it's still 100 out, but we're going to start outbounding and doing marketing for fall tune-ups and things like that right now because we need to fill our October schedule right now. Zach, I think we've talked about it. So, any final thoughts you want to add into this? You want to remind people again how they could reach out to you or how they could get in touch?
Yeah, final thoughts are, if you haven't done so, go back and look at your goals, set your goals for your customers, your service calls, and your maintenance agreements for the summer. Do focus on that as a marketing element, whether you're marketing that through paid services or other channels, helping people sell in the home is still part of a marketing function. So, yeah, if you liked anything we had to say, feel free to reach out. Local Zach on Facebook, LOKALZACH on Facebook if you want to follow me. If you are interested in any marketing help, feel free to reach out. Jamie, thank you for putting in that link. And we'd love to chat. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us. And it was a great conversation. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
SBEodyssey.com is our website. They can go check things out. I do a technician podcast. The format of the podcast is I interview technicians who do a great job of selling maintenances, who understand the value in it, who run great maintenance visits. So Spotify, YouTube, Apple, it's called The Trusted Technician. And you can find a number of the episodes that specifically talk about maintenance and how to sell those and how to show the value and how to navigate those conversations straight from the mouths of technicians who are doing that 50, 60% close rate. So that's a great resource. All right, Zach, I'm going to let you go.
Thanks, man. Talk to
Yep.
you soon.
Talk to you later.